In March of 2020, I started development on my first feature film. I had never attempted anything as complex and as large as that project up to that point. In fact, other than a few short films, some commercial spots, and a couple music videos, I was totally unprepared for a story as large as a feature-length documentary. Fast forward, that same film that same film premiered at the legendary American Black Film Festival. This is insane. That's my movie. Has been screened at more than a dozen film festivals across the country, has won several awards, has opened up doors and opportunities that I couldn't even imagine, has reached distribution, and is now available to more than 70 million people across the world. I know you might be thinking, how in the world did this guy pull off something as large and as incredible as this feature film? Well, in this episode, I'm going to be breaking down my story and my journey to bringing this film to life. I'm going to be showing all the mistakes I made, the lessons that I learned, in hopes that you too will also be inspired and get the opportunity to bring your feature film to life.
Only time you see my head down is when I'm praying. When my back is turned, the only time they wanna see it. Water on me floors cold as ice, I'm finished.
Hey guys, my name is Rafiq Jordan. I am a full-time award-winning filmmaker and a follower of Christ. On this channel, you're gonna get that perfect intersection between faith and filmmaking. I share strategies on how to help filmmakers grow personally and professionally. And I try to root everything in research, my own experience as a filmmaker, and in my faith as a person of faith who's navigating this industry. So if any of that is something that you're interested in, I want to invite you to hit the subscribe button down below. Now, you might have seen some of my other videos that talk about how to grow your video business and giving you strategies on how to earn more money as a freelance filmmaker. Well, today I'm kind of going a different direction. I'm going to share my story on how I directed my first feature film. So this video will be a little less animated than my previous videos, mainly because I just want to focus on sharing my story. It was a long, grueling, but extremely rewarding process. And I really want to help those of you out who might be thinking about directing your first feature film. Maybe you've directed one already and you want to learn from your previous mistakes. I promise you, if you stick to the end, there's going to be tons of great advice that I'm going to share that's going to help you save time, money, and energy. So for those of you who don't know, the film that I'm referring to is my film, Let the Church Say. This film is focused on the historical impact of the Black American church, particularly in the role of social justice. Now, before you even consider making a film, you got to have an idea. So there's that moment when you finally get inspired. And I remember my moment pretty clearly. I was actually in church at the time. There was a young lady who was up front doing a solo, sing a song for the entire congregation. And in the midst of her song, she broke down and she started crying. And I don't know if you, whoever's watching this, if you've ever been in like a Southern Black church before. There's this thing that we do when someone is singing where we just start shouting out a bunch of encouragements and different things to help them get through that moment, especially if it's a very emotional time for them. You might hear stuff like, "Come on, you better sing! Come on now! That's all right! That's all right!" And any other loud encouragement that someone might need in that moment. And I remember sitting there in the church service and just seeing that happen. I mean, it was a pretty large church, so it's like 150, 200 people like yelling out a bunch of encouragements. And the young lady was, felt more encouraged and finally was able to get through the song. And it was just like, yo, I love the way we operate. And when I say we, I'm talking about like Black people. I'm talking about people in my community. I love these parts of our culture in which we will reach out, encourage people, and the love that we show one another in these so raw emotional moments. So all that stuff kind of started to flow through my mind, right? And I started to think about, okay, Well, when we think about this institution, the historical Black church, and how for so long it's been a central figure within the Black community. If you think about the times where men weren't given positions of power or authority or any positions of leadership within the workforce, but they could come to church and they could be deacons and elders and leaders and have an opportunity to stand on stage and speak. When you think about the young people who got opportunities to come up from front and sing solos and tell stories and read from the Bible and kind of build their capacity to speak in front of an audience. When you think about the times that I remember growing up in the Black church, when people would be invited on stage and honored for their years of community service, like these are the different connections in which I'm making all in my mind, and seeing it all rooted back to the church's impact within the Black experience sent me on this like roller coaster ride of research. I was fully present in that moment. And I feel like this is where a lot of raw inspiration happens. But one of the things I want you to look out for, especially when you're in this early stage of being inspired, is that you'll likely get inspired to do multiple different projects. And I think just as equally as important as being inspired is knowing which inspiration to actually chase. When I started this project in March of 2020, when I actually officially started this project, I actually had 2 other films in mind that I got inspired to do before this one. One of them I had already written a script for and had done a full pitch deck for, but doors just started to close. As a person of faith, I kind of felt like that was God showing me that he wanted me to do this film instead. The pandemic happened, which made one of the films pretty much obsolete, like almost impossible for me to execute. And then the other film, I just didn't feel like it was at the place that it needed to be yet. It still didn't feel like it was its time to be told. I want to just invite you to definitely take the time to assess your resources, what you have access to, and make a wise decision before you take that first step of trying to get a story told. The first idea that you're inspired by likely won't be your best one. And even if it is, it will likely need to be honed and crafted and critiqued until it is as strong as it possibly can be. And I always invite people, when I'm talking to other filmmakers who want to get films told, I always invite them to take an assessment of what resources do you have available to you. For me, doing a film about the Black church, I felt pretty strong in that I would be able to not only tell this story because I had spent so many years growing up in the church, but also I already had so many friends and people in my community that were already connected to the church. So I mean, they say a good producer is not just thinking about the film, but to think about distribution. So I was already thinking, before I even understood what distribution was, thinking about, if I'm going to make this film, who do I know is going to watch it? Who do I know is going to be ready to pay, buy a ticket to come see this film or support me if I need to do a crowdfunding campaign? These are the things that you want to start flowing through your mind even before you start writing, because I've had so many conversations with filmmakers who have this like grand idea, like you want to do a science fiction movie in Alaska, which is probably dope. And I'm not in any way trying to say don't follow your dreams. By all means, do it. But if you've never been to Alaska and you have no connections and like this just seems like one of those projects that is far outside of your reach, it might not be the best film to do for your first feature film. Maybe wait after you get a couple more under your belt before you go there and choose an inspiration that's really going to be, I think, easy to execute and is likely going to have the largest potential for growth and impact. But here's the thing, a good idea is not enough. As a filmmaker, it's not good enough to have just a good idea. You have to know how to execute it. And part of that execution is actually being able to articulate the vision. So my next process was doing that research and started to funnel all of this new information I was getting from the church and its involvement in the years of slavery and the civil rights movement, taking all this research and funneling it into a well-articulated idea that I could start to pitch to people, that I can start to formulate like an actual vision, right? Answering the questions like, what is this film going to be about? What am I actually going to show? What type of story do I want to tell? What do I want people to walk away with at the end of this project? I actually spent a lot of time pitching this idea to my wife, who is a really awesome person to pitch stories to. She has a knack for good story, and she's also honest enough to tell me if the story's not strong enough. If it's boring, she watches a lot of documentaries as well, so she can say, hey, I've seen something like that before, or it's not a story worth telling. And that's always important, that you have somebody in your life that's willing to tell you the truth. I'm not talking about your mom. I'm not talking about your best friend that's going to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. You need somebody who knows what they're talking about, who understands good story, maybe even somebody that understands filmmaking. It doesn't always have to be someone like that. It can also be just someone that you consider an avid moviegoer, or someone that you think would potentially be interested in a film with this storyline, and pitch them your project. Pitch it in a way as if it's an elevator pitch. You got 90 seconds and you want to grab their attention. Because if you likely can't inspire or get them interested in watching your film, then it's likely that your film's not strong enough. This is an important step that every filmmaker, every good writer / director needs to go through, because you might think you have a good idea in your mind, and it might be a film that you're interested in watching, but you're not the only one that you want watching this film. So definitely go through that process of pitching. Get you your person. I don't know who they is, but get them, find them, tell them to sit down and hear your story. Then this last block may be a little free, so I may jump to multiple questions, because I could sit and talk all day, but
okay.
Unfortunately. So once I felt like I had a good story idea, I actually took this next step to start to choose some of my core team members. These are the ride or dies. These are the people that are going to be with you likely throughout the entire production process. So for me, I knew I needed someone who understood more about bringing a feature film to life. I needed a producer who had connections, had resources, and I knew would be able to do this film justice. So I reached out to a good friend of mine, Joe, and his sister Nancy, who are both great, awesome producers. We had met about a year, I think, prior at church, but also had worked on several projects together before then. So reaching out to them, I just kind of pitched them my idea and said, hey, this is the story that I've got in mind. This is what I'm thinking about doing. Are you interested in being a part of it? And, fortunately they saw the vision. They understood where I was trying to go. But even after all that time of, pitching, articulation, when you start to pitch it to new people, they have new ideas and new perspectives on how you can hone that and make it even better. I had a lot to learn, and I really appreciate how cool and patient Joe was with me, and Nancy, and working with me to help me finalize this vision and getting to where it needed to be. So this is why I want to invite you to, when you're thinking of those core team members, don't take this lightly, right? You want to make sure that you choose people that have the same vision in mind. Nobody's going to care about your project as much as you do. It is absolutely true. But there are people that you can bring into your life that will care about your project greatly, because they believe in the message that you're trying to put out in the world. And I'm telling you, there's some people that will fight for your project to move forward and be awesome. And Joe and Nancy were two of those people who just got it from the beginning. There are also people who grew up in the church and they understood this type of impact that it could make in the wider world. But remember, this is also during 2020, so there was like a lot of chaos going on. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of suffering. So we all were on the same page that we felt like this is a film that could provide a lot of healing. Now, I keep stressing this point of making sure that you choose the right people, because I've heard of other productions and situations where people didn't choose the right people. Maybe they only wanted to be a part of it for the money, or they only wanted to be a part of it so that they could get the credit. I don't know what the situation is, but likely those individuals will cause more conflict later on in the production process. So it's just so important that when you're first reaching out to people, have an open conversation about what is it that they want from this. If they're agreeing to be a part of it, what is it that they want in return, and see if those goals and those visions align. So even when you have the right people that you're working with, there's still a lot of work to be done. And if you go the same route as me as an independent filmmaker, you're likely going to have to wear multiple hats. I was the writer, the director, the producer. There's so much that needed to be done, and you got to switch hats at different occasions to get the work done. So one of the things that I had to do was develop a pitch deck for the project. So this was really taking all of my ideas and packaging them into a visual document that I can use to pitch to people who wanted to contribute to the project, to get cast members, to even get other crew members on board. You want to have that document that you can use that fully articulates your vision without you having to say anything. So that's what I worked on from pretty much May of 2020 to about June of 2020 to get that pitch deck solidified. From that point on, we actually transitioned over into pre-production and started to gear up to do some filming. Now, I probably wouldn't have transitioned to pre-production as quickly as I did if there wasn't real history happening right in front of my face at that time. Remember, this is June 2020. Like, this is when a lot of the protests started to break out for Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and that kind of shifted my perspective of what this film was going to be about. Yes, it was still focused on the Black American church, but questions started to arise about, like, where's the church fit in all of this pain? What does the church do when people are getting killed in the Black community and there's a big uproar about it? I started asking questions like, wasn't the previous civil rights movement spearheaded by the Black American church? And now in this, new movement that's happening in 2020, it felt like the church wasn't really as much involved. So there was a lot of questions that was going through my head, and that kind of shifted the narrative a little bit, but it also made me move production up. And one of the things that I really wanted to be present for was the March on Washington. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. I want to do a part 2 to this where I share more about my process on set and how this whole story came to be. If you have not already, hit the subscribe button down below and stay tuned for the next episode.